York U.S. Attorney Trini
May
Ross and
14th,
others,
a horrific
they
attack.
within the last little bit announced charges in the mass shooting that happened at the Tops. We'll take you live right now inside the Apollo Theater, right near the Tops store as we get this announcement. Here now, the U.S. Attorney.
Today, I met with the loved ones of the victims and survivors of that attack. And I told them that the Justice Department has just filed a complaint against the individual we allege committed this heinous crime, which had killed 10 people, all of whom were black, and wounded 3 others. The complaint we have filed today charges Peyton Gendron with 10 counts of committing a hate crime resulting in death, 3 counts of committing a hate crime involving an attempt to kill, 10 counts of using a firearm to commit murder during and in relation to a crime of violence, and 3 counts of using and discharging a firearm during and in relation to a crime of violence. The affidavit in support of the complaint quotes the defendant as stating that his goal was to, quote, kill as many blacks as possible. The affidavit outlines how the defendant prepared for months to carry out this attack. It alleges that he selected a target in this zip code because it has the highest percentage of black people close enough to where he lives. He selected the Tops store because it is where a high percentage and high density of black people can be found. And he made a map of the inside of the Tops store, quote, and decided the best plan of attack for the highest chance of success. The affidavit also notes that the defendant chronicled this plan on his Discord messaging account in the months leading up to the attack. Citing that account, the affidavit alleges that the defendant wrote about his acquisition of firearms and other supplies for the attack, and traveled to Tops on multiple occasions to sketch the interior of the store, count the number of black people present, and observe the presence of black security guards. On May 14th, the defendant arrived at Tops wearing a tactical style helmet, camouflage clothing, body armor, and a GoPro video camera, and carrying a loaded Bushmaster XM15 rifle and multiple loaded magazines. The affidavit alleges that he repeatedly targeted, shot, and killed black people. At one point, he aimed his rifle at a white male Tops employee who had been shot in the leg and injured. Instead of shooting the white employee, the gunman apologized to him before continuing his attack. Ballistics evidence recovered at Tops indicated that the gunman fired approximately 60 shots during the attack. In the days and weeks since the attack, we have all witnessed the strength of this community's bonds, its resilience, and its love. I am humbled to have just felt that firsthand in my discussions with the families. Hate-fueled acts of violence terrorize not only the individuals who are all attacked, but entire communities. Hate brings immediate devastation, and it inflicts lasting fear. At the Justice Department, we view confronting hate crimes as both our legal and our moral obligation. The Justice Department was founded more than 150 years ago with the first principal task of protecting black Americans and our democracy from white supremacist violence. Today, we approach that task with the same degree of urgency as we did then. We fully recognize the threat that hatred and violent extremism pose to the safety of the American people and American democracy. We will be relentless in our efforts to combat hate crimes, to support the communities terrorized by them, and to hold accountable those who perpetrate them. No one in this country should have to live in fear that they will go to work or shop at a grocery store and will be attacked by someone who hates them because of the color of their skin. Someone who commits that act because he subscribes to the vile theory that only people like him belong in this country. And no one in this country should have to bury a loved one because of such hate. The Justice Department will never stop working to fulfill our duty to protect the American people from hate-fueled violence. Indeed, it is the duty of every American to stand against such hate. I'm now pleased to turn the podium over to U.S. Attorney Trini Ross. I'll return afterwards for a few questions.
Thank you, Attorney Garland, for your strong support of this community during this difficult time, and thank you for your leadership. My name is Trini Ross, and I am the United States Attorney for the Western District of New York. I was born and raised in the city of Buffalo, attended Buffalo Public Schools, and continue to be a very proud Buffalonian. On the afternoon of March 14th, I received a call that no chief law enforcement officer ever wants to receive. Sorry, I said March, and I mean May 14th. There had been a mass shooting at the Tops Friendly Market on Jefferson Avenue, and there were multiple fatalities on scene. Immediately after receiving the call, I assembled a team from the United States Attorney's Office and put them into action. We have not stopped since that day, and we will not stop until this case comes to a conclusion. As a former career prosecutor with over 23 years as an assistant United States attorney, when I was sworn in as the U.S. Attorney, I fully understood that racially motivated violence was increasing across this country and that it represented a threat to all Americans. Still, there are no words that can adequately capture what it meant to see this sort of terror come to Buffalo and to wreak havoc in our community. As alleged in the complaint, the defendant spent months planning and arming himself for an attack that would target Black residents of Jefferson Avenue. We know the horrific outcome. 10 people killed, 3 people injured, and a community terrorized. But as you are aware, every defendant is innocent until proven guilty. We must prove these allegations, and we intend to do so. Since the day of this attack, we have worked tirelessly to respond, and we will continue to respond until this case is concluded. I want to commend and thank all of the local and federal officials who have committed themselves to addressing this unspeakable tragedy. I know I speak for all of us when I say we will do everything in our power to hold the shooter accountable and to secure as much justice as we possibly can for the victims, their families, and this community. This process may not be as fast as some would hope, but it will be thorough, it will be fair, it will be comprehensive, and it will reflect what is best about our community and about democracy. I would now like to invite Associate Attorney General Vanita Gupta to take the microphone.
Thank you, U.S. Attorney Ross. It is tragic that we are standing here in the aftermath of such a horrifying act of violence, and we grieve with the families who lost loved ones and for this whole community. Hate crimes are insidious. They instill fear across entire communities, and they undermine the principles upon which our democracy stands. No person and no community should ever have to experience this. As the Attorney General mentioned, around the time that the Justice Department was founded, the Ku Klux Klan was carrying out a reign of terror against Black Americans. More than 150 years later, white supremacists are still terrorizing Black Americans and other communities of color, and the Justice Department will not tolerate it. The Justice Department's top priority is holding accountable those who commit these heinous acts. But we must all continue to combat hate and discrimination in all of its forms and address them before they ever escalate to violence. Every community deserves to feel safe and protected. Through vital grant programs and technical assistance, the department is working diligently to support victims and jurisdictions that have experienced these traumatic incidents of mass violence. Here in Buffalo, the Office for Victims of Crime deployed 2 expert mass violence consultants to work with the community and state officials and ensure that everyone who needs and wants services has continued access to mental health and other resources. The Justice Department stands with you, and we will continue working to make real this nation's promise of justice and equality under the law. I am now going to pass it to Assistant Attorney General Clarke.
Thank you, Associate Attorney General Gupta, and Mr. Attorney General and colleagues. Today, I join my colleagues in grieving the innocent victims of this senseless crime and expressing my condolences to their families and the Buffalo community that has suffered through this traumatic event. I grieve with you as a New Yorker, as a Black woman, and as Chief Federal Law Enforcement Officer for Civil Rights at the Department of Justice. Every day we see evidence that racially motivated hate crimes are on the rise across our country. According to the FBI's most recent data, most victims of racially motivated hate crimes are Black. These acts of hate are a stain on our democracy and have no place in our society. Let me be clear, the Civil Rights Division and the entire Justice Department will not stand by idly in the fight against white supremacist-fueled violence. As Attorney General Garland noted, we will pursue the perpetrators of hate crimes and hold them accountable. And we will be vigilant in our quest to secure justice for the victims and their families. Prosecutions alone will not stop the spread of hate. That's why the Justice Department is also hard at work addressing non-criminal acts of bias that rear their ugly head inside our schools, workplaces, and our neighborhoods. We're also addressing the need for hate crime prevention through education and awareness. This multi-part strategy is critical to eliminating hate, root and branch. Today, we charge this defendant with violating the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act, alleging he murdered 10 innocent people and attempted to murder 3 others with a firearm because he wanted to kill and injure Black people. A core mission of the Civil Rights Division is the fight against the scourge of hate crimes, to prevent them, prosecute them, and remedy the harms they cause to communities. That is our duty, and we intend to fulfill it. I want to now invite Deputy Director of the FBI to speak.
Thank you, Assistant Attorney General Clarke, and good afternoon, everyone. I want to begin by expressing my deepest condolences to the victims, to the families and loved ones of those murdered and injured in this vicious attack. We recognize the enduring threat posed by those who commit hate crimes and acts of violent extremism and the devastating impact on people and communities. Taking action against these threats is our highest priority. The full weight and resources of the Department of Justice and the FBI have been brought to bear in this investigation and have involved hundreds of personnel from our Buffalo field office and across the country to support the victims and this community and to engage in the relentless pursuit of justice. The FBI's National Evidence Response Team, along with teams from Buffalo and other field offices, deployed specialized technical equipment for the evidence recovery operation that will be crucial to the successful prosecution and the attainment of justice in this case. A community resource center was established by FBI victim specialists in collaboration with our state and local counterparts to provide essential support and assistance to those impacted by this unimaginable tragedy. Strong, well-established relationships with our law enforcement partners have been indispensable to this response and investigation, and we cannot thank our partners enough for their steadfast commitment and unyielding efforts to help others. We immediately identified this attack as a hate crime and an act of racially motivated violent extremism directed at the very heart of this community. And we've been determined from the beginning to do our part to hold accountable the person who committed this horrific attack and to help this community heal. We remain committed in our work to protect life and freedom, to help and support those who've been victimized, and to seek swift and absolute justice against those who commit acts of violence and terror driven by hate. Our thoughts and prayers continue to be with always all who have been so severely impacted by this terrible tragedy. Thank you.
All right, with that, we'll take some questions. Let's start with Carolyn Thompson from the Associated Press.
Hi. Ms. Ross, will you seek the death penalty? Mr. Garland, would you approve it if so?
This is a death penalty eligible crime. The Justice Department has a series of procedures that follows. First, of course, there has to be an indictment. After the indictment, then the regulatory procedures will be followed, and the families and the survivors will be consulted.
All right, Sadie German, Wall Street Journal.
Hi there. So the gunman in this case was an 18-year-old who used an assault rifle. The current framework being considered by Congress does not include a provision that would raise that minimum age to 21 to purchase such a gun. Should it include such a provision, and what else would the Justice Department like to see in any legislation that Congress is considering to help fight gun crime?
So the Justice Department agrees with the President that 18-year-olds should not be able to purchase a gun like this. Right now, there are meaningful negotiations going on in Congress with respect to a framework, and we look forward to assisting Congress in any way we can in bringing those to fruition.
Eileen Busby.
You talked to the families. Did they tell you, if you can say, that they want the death penalty to be pursued?
So I came here specifically to talk to the families, to express our support and our deepest sympathy for what happened to them, and to tell them exactly what we are charging in the complaint. Out of respect for their privacy, I think I shouldn't share any more than that.
Right, Chris Strong.
Mr. Attorney General, can you talk about what the investigation is learning in terms of what kind of communications the individual may have had with others, and were others involved in the plotting, or at least the inciting the individual?
All right, so let me just begin to be clear that the complaint itself charges only a single defendant, Mr. General. The investigation is ongoing, and I think I'll turn it over to the Deputy Director of the FBI for further discussion about the investigation.
Yes, sir. As the Attorney General, sure. As the Attorney General stated, the investigation is active and ongoing, and we're leaving no stone unturned. That's something that we're continuing to look at. Anyone who is connected with, associated with, in communication with this individual, we're continuing to pursue that, and we'll see where it leads. If it leads us to a place where justice is warranted, we'll go there.
Maki Becker.
Could you explain the process of seeking the death penalty and what happens in terms of the sentencing for that?
There's a Justice Department manual and regulations that were established when Janet Reno was the Attorney General that established a process for discussion of an evaluation of whether the death penalty is appropriate in individual cases, and in particular, it involves discussions with which the U.S. Attorney will have with the families and the survivors, and that's really all I can say at this point.
All right, Jake Gibson.
Thank you very much. Forgive me for an off-topic question, but there have been some criticisms about the protests going on outside of justices' homes, and calls for those individuals to be prosecuted. Do you have any comment on those criticisms?
So the Justice Department takes extraordinarily seriously any violence, criminal threats of violence, intimidation, harassment of the justices or of any government officials. For that reason, we swiftly moved to provide 24/7 protection for the justices, including of their residences. For that reason, I called a meeting with the Marshal of the Supreme Court, with the Director of the Marshal Service, with the Deputy Director of the FBI, and with our prosecutors right from the very beginning to be sure that we were assessing all possible threats and providing all resources available. I also met with the judges, Judge Salas and Judge Sullivan of the Judicial Conferences Committee on Judicial Security, pledged our full support as well as our support for the legislation that they're seeking. There is currently legislation passing through Congress, and the Justice Department is extremely supportive of that security legislation.
So we understand, and there are reports that the suspect was in a chat room with others and could have even told them about the shooting. Are there plans for charges against those people, or does the investigation include looking into that chat room for details?
Well, I think it's fair to say that, as the Deputy Director said, the investigation is ongoing, and that includes all aspects of who the defendant spoke with at any time. That's a normal administrative course for our investigation. I don't know if Paul wants to say any more.
The same. We're pursuing every avenue, again, leaving no stone unturned in this, and we're looking at everyone who may have been in communication with this individual leading up to the attack. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Just as a follow-up, was there any indication that the shooter received help from anyone?
All right, we've been listening to the U.S. Attorney General and several other top officials with the U.S. Department of Justice and the Deputy Director of the FBI. They're laying out these 26 charges that were announced earlier this morning against the suspected shooter at the Tops here in Buffalo from a month ago. We'll show you those charges once more. Again, 10 of them are hate crime resulting in death. Those are the death penalty eligible charges, of which a lot of the discussion surrounded there. No decision made right now on if the death penalty will be sought in this case. The Attorney General telling everyone that he came here to Buffalo first and foremost to talk to the families. He informed them of the charges before making that public, and there will now be a conversation with them as part of the process to determine whether or not the death penalty will be sought in this case. Joining us live right now quickly to give some insight into what we just watched is Anthony Bruce. He is a former Assistant U.S. Attorney out of the Buffalo office. Thanks so much for coming on, sir. And as a former prosecutor, I wonder what you make of the fact that not only the U.S. Attorney General, but a couple of his top deputies for the entire Justice Department came here to Western New York to meet with the families, to announce these charges, and what should we make of the charges that they announced?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It would appear from the actions of the Attorney General and the others who are with him that this case is a top priority case within the Department of Justice. You can't put any other label on it.
Oh, sir, go ahead. We can hear you.
Oh, that was my remark. I mean, they are putting emphasis on this case, as I assume they're putting emphasis on the Texas case, but it shows that the Department of Justice is reaching out, trying to do everything in its power in these cases, and considers this case among the most serious cases it has right now.
Yeah, sorry, I thought we were having a technical glitch there. I'm glad that we were not. Can you walk us through the process as it moves forward? So what they announced today, these 26 charges, are by a complaint, right? We know that an indictment is what would come next. How is this going to play out, and what should the public be looking for or care about as this moves forward?
Well, first of all, totally behind the scenes is there will be an administrative process that the U.S. Attorney's Office in Buffalo will be going through, asking an office in Washington, D.C. For authority, and I'm assuming they're going to ask for authority, asking for authority to ask for the death penalty in this case. The public won't be clued in on that. It'll be completely behind the scenes. At the same time, the U.S. Attorney's Office will take this case to the grand jury and ask the grand jury to charge the case pretty much along the lines that you see in the complaint, because the complaint is a nothing in terms of disposing of the case. They have to have an indictment to dispose of the case, even if they don't ask for the death penalty.
Anthony Bruce is a former prosecutor here in the Western District of New York. Thanks so much for coming on. I know we're going to talk to you more later on today as we continue our coverage. Thanks so much for joining us.
Pleasure. We'll talk to you later.
Just again to remind everyone, there are several storylines to be following today. You have not only, the Attorney General coming here, visiting the memorial that still continues to grow outside the Tops, meeting with family members, announcing these charges, but also the new information that we learned in the complaint from the feds earlier today. We have a reporter digging through that, and of course getting reaction from those family members who were able to meet with the U.S. Attorney General and his top deputies today. So more coverage to come. Beginning on Most Buffalo at 4 o'clock. We have extensive coverage online at WGRZ.com as well. Thanks so much for joining us. We're going to return you now to regular programming. Have a good afternoon.